Welcome to the third Wednesday Vesper service of UMIAC, the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council. I'm Richard Trudeau. I'm a semi-retired UU minister living in Massachusetts. I'm active in the church in Fall River, Massachusetts, and this year I'm the chair of the board of directors of UMIAC. Our sermon tonight is called I Know There's an Answer by Dr. Matthew Shear, who's also going to play the guitar for us. Dr. Matthew Shear is a 1980 graduate of the New England College of Optometry and completed a postgraduate program from the Baltimore Academy for Behavioral Optometry in 2002. He's also trained as a peer counselor, eventually teaching the technique to others. His particular interest is in the effects of misperception on our understanding of ourselves and the world, and how that affects our behaviors. This focus eventually led him from clinical practice to becoming a religious professional. He began preaching lay-led services in 2007, and in 2018 was engaged by Channing Church in Rockland, Mass. As their full-time preacher, where he served for 2 years. Our next service, the next third Wednesday, is April 19th, and the preacher will be the Reverend Craig Morrow, and his sermon title is More Than a Mouthful, which doesn't tell you a lot of what it's about. What it's about is an ancient scripture, not from the Jewish or Christian tradition, or Muslim, I don't think, tradition, an ancient scripture that he feels is appropriate for Easter time, and that features a woman as hero. If you got the link for this service tonight from that email address there, you'll automatically get another one next month unless you opt out. But if the link for this service was forwarded to you by someone else, then they may not forward it to you next month, in which case you might want to send an email to that address just saying you'd like to be added to the list. All of our services are on YouTube, and the simplest way to get to our channel is to go to the UMIAC homepage, umiac.org, and scroll down to the link that's labeled Third Wednesday Services. I'm going to endeavor to light a chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith, having sorrows and joys and needs and gifts. We light this beacon of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and in celebration of the life we share together. We're going to sing a hymn, which means, of course, you have to stay muted and just sing in your home, because the Zoom technology makes it absolutely impossible for sound to come from two windows at once. But our preacher, Matt, is going to play the guitar and lead us in our opening hymn, and I'll put the words on the screen. Are you muted, Matt?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yes, I'm going to sing it in a lower key than is in the hymnal, but it works better for me. It's here we have gathered. Here we have gathered side by side. Circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who speak here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together. this our heart's own song. Next page.
Yep. I'm just trying
I'm
to get
muted
out.
again.
I'm getting out of a window that's popped up here and covering the thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Second verse. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can, sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
It is the mission of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council, UMIAC, to carry out and foster anti-racist and multiracial unity activities, both within and outside the Unitarian Universalist Association, through education, bearing witness, and other actions, and expansion of our membership both within and outside the walls of our congregations. We also seek to defend our UU principles against those who seek to undermine them. We envision our congregations, denomination, and society as not being color blind, but color appreciative, as judging and treating members of the world's rank and file by the content of their character, not the color of their skin or their cultural heritage, and as treasuring diversity in the context of the beloved community. We call this vision multiracial Unitarian Universalism. This is the prize on which we try to keep our eyes. This is the mountaintop. This is the goal, the unity of the light and dark-skinned people of the world.
So am I up now, Richard?
Yes, I think you have a reading.
Yes, I do. Okay. I didn't see myself spotlit, that's all. So thanks, Richard, and I so treasure your friendship and your mentoring to me. It's been a real joy for as long as I've been with UMIAC. And here we have gathered a circle of kinship, our hymn declares, but it seems we're seeing a lot less kinship these days. And so many people loudly assert that they have the answer to today's troubles, and it seems nearly impossible to get them to even consider a different point of view. It's threatening to tear this country apart on a scale not seen since the Civil War, and it's threatening schism in Unitarian Universalism. Perhaps like me, you're alternately exhausted and angered by all this. It's not like there aren't problems that need to be addressed, but how? What's the answer? And in pondering such questions, what came to my mind was, of all things, a song by one of the most popular groups in the 1960s, the Beach Boys. Not, as you may have already deduced, one of their iconic songs from the good old days of Surfin' USA and Little Deuce Coupe and California Girls. Today's service got its title from a fairly obscure song from their 1966 album, Pet Sounds. By that point, their creative genius, Brian Wilson, had grown tired of those themes that had made the group popular over the previous 5 years, and he wanted to create a masterwork that would instead look within at the youthful feelings that the then only 23-year-old was still trying to sort out. Now, maybe you've never heard of this song or even the album, because while Pet Sounds was hailed by music critics as a great work of genius, the public wasn't as accepting of the guys who had sung about surfing cars and girls, turning instead to moody songs of introspection. But the critics were proven right, as Pet Sounds has since achieved iconic status as one of the top 10 albums of all time. This song is not an easy one to sing, and as I can send out a link after the service, or maybe put it in the chat during the discussion afterwards if you want to see it, a YouTube of it. But I find these words quite poignant today, as they were in 1966. And so these are most of the lyrics. I know so many people who think they can do it alone. They isolate their heads and stay in their safety zone. Now, what can you tell them? And what can you say that won't make them defensive? I know there's an answer. I know now, but I have to find it by myself. They come on like they're peaceful, but inside they're so uptight. They trip through their day and waste all their thoughts at night. Now, how can I come on and tell them the way that they live could be better? I know there's an answer. I know now, but I have to find it by myself. So I guess it's now time to go into time of prayer and meditation. I will offer this prayer, and then we'll have a meditative moment. There is so much hurt in the world today, too much anger, hate, and violence. There is too much othering, too much us against them. There is too much division when there should be union, too much rancor when there should be peace. Spirit of life, help each of us see that we can be an instrument of your peace, especially in these times of turmoil, stress, and strife, such as we face these days. Help us to find ways to lift our spirits when we might cast them down. Help us to learn and grow so that we may have a clearer understanding of the world. Help us heal our wounds so that we can live life with an open heart filled with loving kindness. Help us find the strength and courage to reach out to others rather than close in, so that those others may be filled up as well. And help us find the bliss, a zestful enjoyment of life that comes from living life to its fullest potential. Amen. And now let's have that meditative moment. And now we're going to have another hymn, as you can see, number 318, We Would Be One. All these hymns are really my favorites. I have many favorites, but these are my three top ones, and I try to sing them as often as I can. We would be one, as now we join in singing our hymn of love, to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which by guides us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free. Okay, and now I'm dropping my sheet of music. There we go. Okay. Thanks again for coming, and I hope you get a lot out of this. Richard introduced me as someone, whose professional license is in optometry, and you might ask, what's this optometrist doing preaching to me? I thought the only probing question they ever ask is, which is better, one or two? Now, my answer is that clarity of vision and clarity of mind and thought actually have a lot in common, and the process of getting to each turns out to have a lot in common too. Now, of course, the health of the eye is important and necessary, as is asking those 1 and 2 questions and ensuring a sharp image on the retina provided by one's glasses. Now, I know a lot about this. I worked in a cataract practice for 16 years, and restoring sight is great, but sight only starts in the eye. Vision includes not just the process of gathering light in your eye, but sending that signal to the brain, and more importantly, the visual processing in your brain, what the brain does with that input to make sense of it. Now, optometrists are called eye doctors, but what attracted me to the profession was that aspect of it, more properly called vision care. So I think it's important at this point to talk about what I mean by vision. Now, as Richard said, I did postdoctoral studies in a field called behavioral optometry, and I can honestly say it did change my life. Starting from the first day when the director of the program, this visionary guy, his name is Paul, gave this definition of vision. He said, vision is the deriving of meaning and the directing of action stimulated by light. And he said, vision is more than simply seeing clearly. It is the entire process whereby an individual understands what he or she sees and uses that information to direct his or her actions. I immediately understood how important these words were, not just within the scope of the specialty practice of behavioral optometry, but metaphorically for life in general, because it's about functioning, achieving a more effective use of input and with less effort. Now, the more you're able to do that, the more satisfying life becomes, starting with school, but continuing throughout life. And every behavioral optometrist I know has a display of unsolicited written statements from their patients attesting how that doctor had rescued them from a life of frustration and failure. And as again said, that led me on a decade-long journey from the exam room to the pulpit. And so tonight, I want to ask you 2 things. What meaning are you deriving from what you're seeing in yourself, in others, and in the world? What actions are you directing in response? But there is one other important question that needs to be asked, which is, how do you know that the meaning you derive and the actions you direct are reasonably accurate and actually producing that positive outcome, and doing so while not crushing your spirit in the process? Because I would say we're not here to suffer. Now, in behavioral optometry, we measure inefficiencies in the way we process visual information and then prescribe a series of visual experiences designed to achieve greater efficiency and effectiveness in deriving meaning and directing action through use of your eyes. Now, I would assert to you tonight that this model can be applied broadly to the human condition, well, in general. The phrase that resonated for me during my training was when Dr. Harris explained the basis of the various vision therapy, or VT, exercises he taught us. He said, we're offering the patient an opportunity to learn to see things a new way. Now, there's one important side effect when you go into these novel experiences, in that they can feel stressful because they take you outside of your habitual ways of processing what you're experiencing. And perhaps that's why Dr. Harris shared with us in support materials the writing of a guy named Hans Selye, a 20th century endocrinologist who studied the effects of stress on the body. And Hans Selye concluded with this statement: "It's not stress that kills us, it's our reaction to it." It's important to note that a vision therapy program typically involves weekly in-office therapy sessions in which the doctor or a trained therapist guides the patient through a series of these visual experiences, which are then reinforced by daily homework exercises. Such a program can take 6, 12, or even 18 months, depending on the patient's needs. And the tie-in to tonight's topic is that there is no one way to do it, no right way versus wrong way. Just about anything has the potential to affect visual processing in a positive way if done within a framework of understanding derived from continuously building on a rich tradition and through learning from a multiplicity of sources. You kind of see where I'm going with this? The only test is whether or not those things lead to improved functioning, which we can test through repeated evaluation, more bang for the buck, as it were. With experience as a practitioner, you have more and more of them at your disposal, allowing you to practice more and more freely and be less formulaic. I believe that we can and ought to view Unitarian Universalism the same way if we want to realize its fullest potential. Those of us who are gathered here are, for the most part, interested in resisting illiberalism in today's Unitarian Universalist administration. UMIAC is just one of a few groups that I collectively call the resistance, because I feel we share the common idea that a liberal religion is the only one that has been shown to work well in the long run. I know there's an answer says something very profound. The answer offers a retreat into a static, unchanging safety zone of orthodoxy and leads to zero-sum contests of will that result in winners and losers. An answer recognizes not only that there can be many possible options now, but also that one's own thinking can evolve over time, allowing us the possibility to learn even better ways to move forward and course correct accordingly as needed. An answer opens the door to achieving a more profound synthesis by working together with those who have a different point of view, which is like when we have two eyes, they're slightly different point of view, and that's how we get true 3D vision. We can have a greater depth of our spiritual understanding by working together with those who have also a slightly different point of view. Now, there's two quick stories to illustrate this point. This idea that two eyes together give this enhanced depth of stereo vision, we call it, through true 3D vision, was written about quite strongly by a professor of neuroscience at Mount Holyoke College, who we know her, Sue Barry was her name. And this is her story. She says, for most of my life, the last place I wanted to be was in an eye doctor's office. I had been cross-eyed since infancy, and despite 3 surgeries, remained cross-eyed and stereo blind. And I should add here that it's not like you can't tell that something's in front of something else, but it's not the same. It's the difference between low def TV and high def TV, or mono versus stereo, that kind of thing. She's talking as a PhD neuroscientist. Scientific dogma indicated that my visual deficits resulted from changes in brain circuitry that had occurred in infancy and could not be reversed in adulthood. So when I finally consulted a behavioral optometrist and began optometric vision therapy at age 48, I took a significant risk. I had to think beyond the conventional wisdom, abandon old visual habits, and master skills that most children acquire within the first 6 months of life. As I began to straighten my eyes and see in 3D, I learned that the adult brain is indeed capable of significant plasticity. Rewiring in the adult brain requires the presence of novel and behaviorally relevant stimuli, the conscious abandonment of entrenched habits, and the establishment through practice of new ones. So if you read in a textbook that something is not possible, it ain't necessarily so. With a great deal of self-awareness, a lot of hard work, and the right training, many of you will be able to accomplish what was once thought to be impossible. And if you get a chance to look up Sue Barry, who's known in this manner as Stereo Sue, when she talks about it and she shows some of the stuff, great talks. Now, there's the other thing that's moved me a lot, especially recently, is a 2-line poem by Walt Whitman from out of Leaves of Grass, at least one of the later editions. And it's called The Untold Want. The untold want, by life and land ne'er granted, now, voyager, sail thou forth to seek and find. Now, I came to know this poem from watching a movie called Now, Voyager a few months ago. It earned Bette Davis a 1942 Best Actress Oscar nomination for her portrayal of Charlotte Vale, the self-described spinster daughter of a wealthy Boston family whose spirit has been crushed by her domineering, unloving mother. But it's a story of redemption, a cinematic parable that shows us the power of our principles to rescue a stifled soul. More importantly, I was taken by the imagery of a voyager sailing forth to seek and find, and I think it is an apt metaphor for what liberal religion asks of us. Crossing an ocean by ship takes time, enough for it to not just cover the distance, but also to be a journey of discovery. It takes time to see when there needs to be a course correction. And this was even more true in Whitman's time, when most sea voyages were still powered by sail, although that was starting to change. Sometimes your voyage will require sailing into the wind rather than having it at your back, and you can't literally do that, so you have to tack back and forth off the wind as the next best thing. But anyone who's been sailing, and I only did this once, so I'm not saying I'm an expert, but stay on one tack too long, and eventually you're still moving forward, but you're farther and farther from your true destination. The answer is to come about and tack back. That corrects for this, keeping you zigzagging, but more or less on course. And I would say that today's world, things tend to move very fast. And I say that when we move that fast, we cannot do this process. Vision therapy takes months, and I say doing liberal religion right can also take a long time. But if it gets you there, that's good. Now, where's the end point of this journey? I say it's in the ultimate expression of the full potential of our humanity, even if we can't quite see or describe all the details. I think Theodore Parker put this well in an 1853 sermon titled Of Justice and the Conscience. And this is where Martin Luther King got his more iconic version of it from. But these are the words that Parker said. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye, there's the word eye again, I couldn't help it, right? My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice. So again, we're in it for the long haul, and that's what counts, is do you get there and does it stick? So let me quickly walk you through the way I keep these things straight when it comes to our brand of liberal religion, and I have some experience in political campaigns, and you need a theme, you need a hook, although I suppose when we do canvas or stewardship or pledges, you need a theme, you need a hook to get people to think about it. And this is my hook. And it's a sequence of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Pretty easy to keep in your mind. But behind each number lies important concepts derived from this behavioral approach to liberal religion. One is that there is only one you. There is no one else exactly like you, and there never will be again. And you have so far lived a unique life, one not led by anyone else before, and will not be led in exactly the same way by anyone else again. That's our starting point. But where do you go next? And this, I would have to say, it depends on the number two thing, which is two questions you need to answer for yourself if the rest of what I'm going to say is to have any meaning for you. And the first one of these two questions is, are you going to take a liberal or conservative or orthodox approach to religion or spirituality? And the conservative, and this is, of course, a simplification, but I think it applies. They tend to think we are inherently bad, born in sin, and must be saved by a rigid adherence to a particular creed, sacred text, or set of religious practices, and often for rules and living in general. That's not, good works can happen, but it's in service to that faith. I say, and I kind of preach into the choir here, liberal starts with we are inherently good and seek ways to express that better. We are guided by our creeds, text, and practices. Good works are the natural byproduct of that faith, but it starts with number one. The other choice is one that's a little harder to swallow, I think. It's suppression versus release of emotion. Life is more than thinking. In challenging us, change creates stress, some of which is expressed emotionally. I think this is important because I have satisfied myself that when one can superimposes a control over those feelings, they're still in there, but keeping them locked up inside keeps you locked up as well. Hans Selye told us that the problem is not stress itself, but rather our reaction to it. We shouldn't let our feelings control us, especially in our interactions with others. But I believe that in an appropriate time and place, and in the presence of someone who understands such things, tears, laughter, trembling, and the like are healing. And I've experienced that both as patient and provider. Of course, like anything, that can be taken too far. The point is not the tears themselves, but rather the freeing of your mind by the release of them. So that's points 1 and 2. 3 is the division of time into past, present, and future. In case you haven't noticed, the past is fixed. You can't change it no matter how hard you try. But the future is up for grabs. And the point of decision is every moment you experience in the present. In that present moment, we must free ourselves from misperception and unhelpful habits from the past so that we can move forwards to that better future. And number 4 describes what that better future looks like for us. And again, there are many wonderful sources in our Unitarian Universalist traditions that describe it. This is how I boiled it down to, again, another little helpful memory anchor. And it's 4 things, and I've arranged them that in a way that you might remember. It's OFAB, O-F-A-B, OFAB. And I think they are pretty fab. And they are, O is an open heart, one filled with loving kindness. And this means that we do not other those people who do not yet see things our way. We see a human soul or spirit behind their less than fully positive behaviors. It is, and an open heart is one not ruled by our old pain, but rather filled with loving kindness that allows us to be generous and kind and forgiving rather than petty, vindictive, or vengeful. F is the free mind. And this is laid out very nicely in reading 592 in our great hymnal, words from William Ellery Channing, who again laid down that marker in his 1819 Baltimore sermon called On Unitarian Christianity. These words actually were from an 1830 election sermon he gave at the State House to the Massachusetts legislature and governor. And so free mind. And a free mind seeks truth, cherishes doubt, and is ruled by fact rather than feelings. And the particulars go on and on in that reading. A is the word we hear a lot these days. It's agency. I define it as the ability to shape things according to your vision, to not be subject to the uncaring whims of others. At a low level, it can be used defensively to ward off blows of a hard life, but in its full potential lies in helping others to free their minds and open their hearts. And finally, the B of OFAB is bliss. And that word comes from John Hassler Dietrich, who I'm sure many of you or all of you know was the Unitarian minister who 100 years ago began preaching humanism, not just as philosophy, but also as a spiritual pursuit in Unitarianism. He said his naturalistic humanism had brought him, quote, a feeling of bliss, and with it the intense longing that I may so live that posterity may have this feeling more fully and more often in the better world we ourselves must build, end quote. Others have called this a zestful enjoyment of life. I think we would all want a life that is OFAB. The challenge is how to get there from that unique place your past has led you to at this moment of decision, using any of the tools that we have at our disposal. And the next 3 points spell those out. The number 5 is the 5 smooth stones of liberal religion as related by James Luther Adams, great 20th century Unitarian and theologian, taught many years at Harvard Divinity and eventually at Andover Newton. He laid out those 5 characteristics of liberal religion, which I've boiled down to these bullet points. Revelation is continuous, ongoing. There is no one sacred text, and we can add new ones as we discover them. 2, and this is quoting him, all relations between persons ought to ideally rest on mutual free consent and not on coercion. And from this, I say, therefore, it is not confessional. 3rd stone, it involves the establishment of what Adams called a just and loving community. And I say there's plenty that you can do on your own, but to get the whole package, you really need a community such as ours, in our churches, here at UMIAC, and other such places. The 4th one he called social incarnation. And I see this as meaning that our ideas and ideals won't matter unless they become manifest in the institutions of society, including its laws. And his 5th one is that it is hopeful. And 6, maybe should be no surprise, it's those 6 sources that we find in the front of our hymnals and that many of us are fighting to keep enumerated as such. And all I can add to that is I see them not as distinct sources, but as source categories. And I think it's important to look at it that way because I believe, and I have found for myself, that there's something valuable to be learned from each one of them. And some of them are more accessible at the beginning, others you have to work for, but I take it on faith that there's something there, and that helps draw me in and find it. I say, do this, dip into all of these 6 source categories, and you're more likely to find the very tool you might need to get unstuck on your journey from where you're starting to that OFAB future, and to help others do the same with greater effectiveness and efficiency and less strain. 7, no surprise, our 7 principles, which I'm not going to enumerate here, but the shortest form I ever heard was be nice and recycle, but that leaves a few things out. It's got the search for truth and meaning, and basically the rest are like what we used to say in the Superman TV show, truth, freedom, and the American way. And it's summed up in 8 words, which is inherently good, better person, better world, many sources, which I have used as my 2-second elevator speech. And I think it works fine. Taken together, these things connect as a yardstick for measuring your progress, a compass or sextant for guiding you on life's voyage. Your journey is uniquely yours, but you can use a robust method to get you from where you're starting to that vision of a better you and your part in making this a better world. I say, have faith, there's an answer. And this was said quite strongly by Olympia Brown, who many of us know, mainly as that woman, the first woman minister to be ordained by her denomination, which in her case was the Universalists back in 1863. These words came from the last sermon she preached at age 85, when she came back to the church in Racine that she had built up after having left it to pursue women's suffrage. And she gave this sermon the year she cast her first ever vote in that presidential election. So my only concern about what I'm about to read is that if you take words that she uses like work and sacrifice and cost too literally, you can then misuse it and end up back in this exhaustion and stressing out that is not what I see in them. So, but these are the actual words she preached, and you'll see they're slightly different from, if you're familiar with the reading in the hymnal, they're slightly different. But here's what she preached. Dear friends, stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it. There is nothing in all the world so important to you as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before you the loftiest ideals, which has comforted you in sorrow, strengthened you for noble duty, and made the world beautiful for you. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that you are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, and that you are strong enough to work for a great, true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation. Amen, and may it be so. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Matt. We don't pass the plate, but we spend a minute talking about our organization and try to entice people to check us out and possibly join us. Our goal is the unity of the light and dark-skinned people of the world. Our immediate goal in the context of the present UU turmoil is to be a service organization to UU congregations, to provide UU congregations with something that the Unitarian Universalist Association seems incapable of providing them with right now, namely sensible advice and support on matters of racial justice. That's why we exist. And if you go to our website, you'll see it's kind of old-fashioned looking, but we're very close to making it look a lot better, though of course the content won't change. If you ignore the old-fashioned features, I think you'll find some of the present content to be worth reading. And now our closing hymn.
Thanks. I have to say, I think this is my favorite hymn, and I think it nicely sums up the spirit of what I was preaching, which I hope you enjoyed. Be that guide whom love sustains, rise above the daily strife, lift on high the good you find, help to heal the hurts of life. Be that helper daunting dawns, down of friend or taunt of foe, ever strive for liberty, show the path that life should go. Be that builder trusting good, bitter though the test may be, through all ages they are right, though they build in agony. Be that teacher faith directs, move beyond the old frontier, though the frightened fear that faith be tomorrow's pioneer. Thanks.
Do you have closing words?
Oh, I'm sorry. Closing words. Here. All right, here we are. Thank you. I know there's an answer, one that will serve you well right now for what you are dealing with at this moment in your life. And I think that James Luther Adams ended that essay with words that speak to this point. Anyone who does not enter into that struggle with the affirmation of love and beauty misses the mark and thwarts creation as well as self-creation. Thus, with all the realism and tough-mindedness that can be mustered, the genuine liberal finally can hear and join the Hallelujah chorus. Intellectual integrity, social relevance, amplitude of perspective, and the spirit of true liberation offer no less. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now because